Hey guys, how's it going and welcome to this video. In this video, I want to talk to you about the MVVM architecture on iOS and how we can structure an app that uses this MVVM architecture. And for this video, I'm going to code out an app using the MVC architecture first, and then I'm going to transform this into the MVVM architecture, and maybe we can just discuss about also like what the benefits are using the MVVM architecture and when should you use the MVVM architecture versus an MVC. Okay, because I believe most of us are very familiar with the MVC architecture, and I just want to show you the how it distinguishes from each other. All right, and for this demo project, I'm going to build a very simple table view, and I'm going to populate this with some JSON over here. So as you can see on my website, I'm on this JSON placeholder website .typecode.com, and what this place does is that it provides us a sample JSON payload. Alright guys, anyway, I also want to apologize for the background sound, so I hope that you don't mind because everyone's awake at this moment at home, so you know it's going to be a little bit noisy, okay? But I hope that the voice and the tutorial will be clear to you, and you'll probably get some value from watching this video today. Alright, so I'm going to use this users endpoint over here /users. So if I'm to click on this, notice that this returns to me a JSON payload. So this returns to me an array of 10 items. Okay, so you see over here ID is equals to 10. But what we are really interested in is just probably the name of the user as well as the email which we will use to populate the table view. Alright, so if I can show it to you how the app looks like, it's going to look something like that. Alright, so okay, just ignore that gray background. It's going to look something like that. We have the name over here. Okay, so Lena Graham as well as the email address over here. Alright, so now let's build this using the MVC architecture. Okay, so I'm going to open Xcode right now, and then I'm going to select the single view app, and then let's call this MVC to MVVM demo app. Alright, something like that. And then I'm going to use the storyboard for this example, and probably in some subsequent videos I'll probably show you how we can do this using Swift UI as well. Alright, so let's click on the next button, and I think I'm just going to save this in my desktop. Alright, it looks kind of messy, but alright, we are here. And then what we want to do right now is to just come to the storyboard, and we want to change this to a table view controller instead. So let's delete this and let's just bring in a table view controller. Oops, not table view cell, table view controller. Okay, and let's not forget to make this an initial view controller over here. And then I'm going to use, I won't be using a dynamic table view cell, so because we only have 10 items, so I'm going to just create a custom table view cell which has the subtitle as well. Okay, so I'm going to change this to table view. Maybe let's call this users table view controller and UI table view controller. Let me just copy this, come back to the main.storyboard, and let's just paste this at the top over here. Okay, let's just assign this, hit the enter button. Okay, so right now I want to just create some very basic boilerplate code over here. So cell for row, let's do let cell equals to UI table view cell. Okay, and then let's select the one that says style, and then let's go with subtitle, and then for the user identifier I think we can just pass in a nil. And then let's not forget to also return the cell, and then for the cell, for the text label dot title, text label dot text, we want to assign this as header. Okay, just for placeholder sake. And then the subtitle, is it subtitle detail dot text equals to subtitle. Alright, so we're going to do a number of rows and section as well, so let's just return 5 for the time being, and let's just quickly run the app to ensure that this is working. Okay, so let's just build this. Alright. Okay, just let me just run this for a little while. Okay, alright guys, so as you can see right now we have this 5 cells over here, header and subtitle. Okay, so now what we want to do is to make a call to this endpoint over here. So let me just copy this, and then I'm going to maybe just create everything within the same file so we don't have to toggle back and forth. So let's create some kind of API manager here, API manager. Okay, and then I'm going to do let URL string equals to this. Oops. Okay, just give me a minute. Alright, so I'm going to create a function over here that says fetch users. Okay, let me just bring this up to the top a little bit. And then fetching users is going to return to us some kind of result over here. So let's create a completion handler. Okay, so oops. So within this, I'm going to do a Swift result type. And then I'm going to pass in something over here. But of course, let's define the model now. So let's go to strut. Let's go with user. And then let's come to the payload to see how the payload looks like. Alright, so we want something like that. Let's copy this and let me just paste this over here. Alright, so what do we need? Maybe we do need an ID. Alright, let name and maybe let email. Okay, so we need these 3 properties over here. I don't think we need the rest. Okay, and then let's also make this decodable, okay, so that we can decode this easily without passing it manually. Okay, so I want to pass in the user, an array of user, and of course in the failure case I want to pass in the error over here. Alright, so guys, so this is the typical workflow that I believe most of us are very familiar with. So URLSession .shared data task with, okay, probably this one, and then let's construct the URL equals to URL. Okay, let's find the one that we can construct it via a string. Let's pass in the okay, maybe let's just cut this in. Let's pass in the URL string. Let's force unwrap this because we know that this will definitely work. And then let's pass in the URL over here, and then let's hit the enter button. So data, response, and error. Alright guys, so the first thing we want to do is to handle the error first. So if let error equals to error, so if an error exists, then we want to call the completion handler, and we want to pass in the failure case. So let's pass in the error, and I think let's just put in the escaping keyword, otherwise Xcode is going to bug us in later. Alright, so I'm going to return if an error exists. Okay, so but if the error does not exist, then we want to ensure that we have the data. So data else return. Okay, maybe I'm going to do something like fader error instead. Fader error, data cannot be found, alright, something like that. Okay, and then so if I have the data, I'm going to pass it into the users array model. So I'm going to do you're going to use a do catch block. Okay, whoops, do catch block. And then I'm going to do let users equals to try, and then I'm going to do JSON decoder. Okay, let's initialize this and let's decode. So we want this one. So the type is going to be user.self, and then for the data, we have the data over here. So let's just pass in over here. And then once this is successful, we want to call the completion handler and just pass in the success case, so we can pass in the users over here. Alright, if there's an error and it catches it, we want to pass that in as well. So let's call the failure case, and let's pass in the error over here at the back. Alright, so guys, this should be pretty easy to understand, and I guess this is the most common way that we have been doing this for many years. Alright, so let's also not forget to call the resume method over here. Okay, so very simple stuff over here. So what I'm going to do, why is this completing? I think let me do a command B to ensure that this is building successfully. Great. Okay, so guys, right now I'm going to do a maybe users over here, and then users empty array, and then maybe let's do a did set. Okay, so every time a user is being assigned to this variable, we want to call the table view to reload the data. Okay, and then let's call fetch users over here. Okay, private func fetch users, and then we have some of us are very apt to are very inclined to make this a singleton. So let's let shared equals to API manager. Okay, and then maybe a private. Okay, so sorry, this can't be a private, so let's share a private init. Okay, so the way most people would do it will be API manager dot shared. Let me do a dot shared. Oops, why is that not happening? Oh, sorry, static let, my bad. Alright, dot shared dot fetch users, hit the enter button, result, switch the result. Okay, if this is a success case, let users, and then we're gonna assign let self users equals to users. Alright, if there's a failure case, let's handle the error. Maybe for the time being, let's just print out the error. Okay. Okay guys, I guess this is what it will take for it to work. Okay, I forget to assign the user over here, so let's go with let user equals to users. Let's pass in index path dot item. So for the header, it'll be user dot name, and then for the subtitle, it'll be user dot email. Okay, and then for this, we need to return users dot count. Alright guys, so this is the MVC architecture, and I believe this will work. Will it work? Okay, I think I have to move something to the main thread, I believe. Let me just have a look. Okay, over here, my bad. Alright guys, so what I can do is that I can just move this dispatch queue dot main dot async. I can just move this over here instead. Okay. Okay, let me just build this one more time, and I believe this will work. Alright guys, so pretty simple stuff over here. So one of the benefits of using the MVC architecture is that, as you can see, it's really simple to implement. You know, we use like, you know, less than 100 lines to just build this very simple list over here. Of course, you know, if you use Swift UI, it's going to be even lesser lines. Okay, but one of the disadvantages of doing this is that it makes testing a little bit harder. Okay, because everything is, the logic and the views are very much coupled together. Okay, so it's very difficult to do mocking when writing unit tests. Alright guys, so I want to show it to you how you can do this using the MVVM architecture, and also I want to implement the combine framework while implementing this using the MVVM architecture. So you're going to learn some extra new stuff over here as well. Okay, alright guys, so let's get started by creating the MVVM architecture for this. So very simply, rather than just creating a brand new Xcode project, I'm just going to create a brand new target over here. So maybe let's call this single view application, and then let's call this MVVM version. Alright, let's hit the finish button. Okay, so now we have these two targets. So what it means is that now I can just toggle between the two different apps over here. Okay, so now I can just open this MVVM version. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing as well for the main.storyboard. I'm going to change this into a table view controller. So let's bring this in, table view controller. Okay, and then let's just assign this as the initial view controller, and then let's come back to the view controller over here. I'm going to do users users view controller, and users table view controller, my bad, and UI table view controller. And let's come back to the storyboard and let's just assign this. Okay, so users table view controller. Alright guys, so the only thing that I want to copy from the previous project is just the model itself, which is this one. Okay, I'm going to change the entire API manager because we are going to use the combine framework. Okay, so let me just copy this and let me just paste this inside over here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is also to just create those boilerplate codes over here. So let cell equals to UI table view cell. Let's initialize this. Dot subtitle nil return cell, and then number of rows in section. Maybe let's just return 5 for the time being, and cell dot background color equals to yellow. Okay, so let's just make sure that this is working first. So let's come over here and then let me just hit the play button. So what I do expect to see would be 5 yellow cells, okay, which is cool. This is what we see. Alright guys, so now the first thing I want to do is that because we are building this in the MVVM architecture, so VM stands for view model, so we want to create some kind of view model over here. So let's create class, so users view model. Okay, we don't need to inherit anything over here. So within this view model, this should contain all the business logic for the users table view controller. So in the MVVM architecture, we want to keep the view control as stateless as possible. Okay, so the view controller you should think of it as like a UI view. All right, it shouldn't do anything more than just displaying things. It shouldn't be, you know, making any it shouldn't contain any business logic, ideally as much as possible. Okay, so for this view model, I'm just going to create one function called fetch users, and the difference is that you notice that we're not going to return any kind of completion handler over here. So once we are able to fetch the user, we want to assign it to some kind of variable over here, which the users table view controller will observe from. Okay, so guys, I know it sounds a handful and it's a bit hard to explain, so let me just build out the app and it will be clear for you to understand. Okay, so what we can do is that we can say, hey, let's create a view model over here. So view model, users view model I mean, and then we are going to maybe just set up this view model. Okay, set up view model. let's create the private func over here. So I'm going to say view model equals to users view model. Let's initialize this. So now we can do that because we don't have any properties over here. So but subsequently when we add more things inside here, this is going to break, and then we can just fix this. Okay, so what we can do is that let's create the API manager here. So so class API manager. Okay, oops. Okay, and then what I want to do is that I want to import the combine framework, because that is what I'm going to use to construct the API manager. Alright, so let me just have a look at my my guide. Okay, so what we need to do is that I'm going to create a function over here. So class, func fetch items. Alright, so notice that the difference is that in the previous example I did something like fetch users, but over here I'm just going to call this fetch items because I want to make this as generic as possible, as dynamic as possible. Okay, so I'm going to also just add a completion handler over here. Okay, so let's just make this escaping, and then because I want this to be generic, I'm going to do something like that. Okay, and what this means is that the items that I fetch needs to conform to the decodable protocol. Okay, so I think you'll be very familiar with something like that. You know, the previous example we did something like this, user error, but this time what I want to do is that I want to make this T instead of user. Okay, so that this is dynamic. All right, so what this means is that, you know, in the previous example, you know, you'll be very tempted to do something like fetch users blah 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 over here, and then you have another one that says maybe fetch comments, and then you have something like fetch post. Okay, yeah, you're very likely to create all these kind of functions over here and then just call these functions in places of the app that you need. Okay, but in this example, in this MVVM example, we are only going to create one function, and we want to make this as dynamic as possible, and therefore we bring in this this generic over here. All right, guys, so I'm going to show you to you how we're going to do this. So URLSession, we're still going to use the URLSession. Okay, .shared.data task, but this time we want to use this data task publisher over here. Okay, so I want to pass in a URL, so maybe I can just pass in a URL over here. Okay, so it will be URL here, and then I'm going to do .map. Oops, is this working? Okay, .map. Okay, and then I'm only interested in the data. Okay, so let me just remove the space over here. And then I also want to decode this. All right, so let's use this one over here, and let me just make this into a new line so that it's a lot easy to read. So this decodable protocol. All right, so again, in the previous example we did something like that, but this time I'm going to use a T instead. Okay, so for the decoder, it's going to be JSON decoder. Let's initialize this. Okay, and then we want to call the sync method. All right, so what the sync method does is that every time we get a result, we want to this sync method will actually be called to pass us this result. Okay, so let's handle the second one over here first. So receive value is when there's a success case, so let's hit the enter button. So this will be the result array. Okay, so when this happens, I can call the completion handler, and I can pass in the success case over here, and let me just pass in the result array. Okay, so for this one over here, it says receives completion.error. So this happens, this will be called when we receive an error, or when we decide to end the process. Okay, so let me show it to you what I mean. So let me just hit the enter button again, and maybe I'm going to call this result completion. So let's switch through the result completion. You notice that there are two cases over here. One is the failure case, and the other is the finish case. Okay, so we are only interested in the failure case, so let me just handle that right now. Okay, so if this is happening, let's call the the failure case, and let's pass in the error over here. Okay, so this completion is this guy over here. Okay, but if let's say this is the finished case, then maybe what I'm interested to do is just to break this. Okay, all right, so this is looking okay. Let me just do a command B to just build this. Okay, build succeeded, but this itself is not going to work. Okay, because we have to store this inside some kind of subscribers. That's why it's saying that the result of call is unused. So what I can do is that I can do something like that, private var subscribers. Oops, am I spelling this incorrectly? Yeah, subscribers equals to set of any cancelable. Okay, and then I'm going to just store this inside the subscriber over here. Alright guys, again I apologize for my birds that are chipping away. It's the morning right now, so the family is a bit active, so excuse me for that. And then let's do a command B. So I believe this should work. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is that, so when I call this fetch user method, I want to call this fetch items function from this API manager. So I'm going to use dependency injection to do this. So dependency injection. Alright, so I'm going to do a private let API manager equals to API manager, and then I also want to have the I also want to have the endpoint as well. Alright, I'm going to steal that again from here. Alright, I think I needed this. Oh, do I have it? Oh, sorry guys, my bad. Let's just create this right now over here. So let's go with strut. Maybe let's create an enum over here. Enum endpoint. Okay, and then let's do with users fetch. Okay, and then let's do var URL string. This will be of type string. Let's switch the user. Okay, so if this is a user fetch, okay, let me just remove the decode, the default. If this is a user fetch, then we want this. Okay, so return this. Alright guys, so as you can see, what I'm doing is to modularize everything rather than coupling it together. So I know that the downside is that it's going to introduce a lot more code, but this will be a lot easier, you know, if your app starts to become very big, and it's really helpful to just modularize everything. Okay, so I want to pass in an endpoint as well. So let's come over here to the top. So endpoint, so endpoint over here. Alright. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I need to create an init over here. So I'm going to pass in this API manager, and then I want to pass in the endpoint as well. Okay, so it'll be self.api manager equals to API manager, self.endpoint equals to endpoint. Okay, so command B to just build this. So it's breaking. Okay, so we have to pass in these two things over here. So it's complaining now. So let's create an instance of it. API manager equals to API manager. Let's initialize this, and then let's paste this in here. And then for the endpoint, we are going to call the user fetch. Okay, so the reason why I created that enum is because you could have, you know, many other cases. So for example, commands fetch. Okay, something like that, whereby, you know, you have to commands fetch, and then probably it's going to look something like that. Alright, so you can basically define all your endpoints over here and then just switch through it. Alright, so that's the reason why I do it this way. And then under this fetch user, I'm going to call API manager dot fetch items. Okay, so let's construct the URL. So URL equals to URL, and then let's find the one that has string inside, which is this guy over here. And because I have the endpoint, I can do something like endpoint dot URL string. Alright, so as you can see, this is really clean, and it's very reusable in that sense. Okay, so let's pass in the URL over here, and then let's hit the enter button. So result, so switch through the result, and I believe Xcode is going to complain. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is a underscore, and the reason why this is happening is because it says that the generic parameter t could not be inferred. And the way we can fix this is we can define what the result type signature should look like. Alright, so it should look something like that, result. And then we know that in the success case, we want to return the user. On the failure case, we want to return just the error itself. Okay, and therefore now if I do a command B, this will build successfully. Okay, so let's do switch result. Okay, so if this is a success case, we get the users. Okay, if this is the failure case, obviously we get the error over here as well. Okay, so what I can do is that I can make a variable over here. So let's call this users subject. I can do something called let me look at my my guide for a little bit. Okay, so I can do something called a pass-through subject over here. Pass-through subject. So what a pass-through subject does is that at the start it doesn't contain any value. So as you can see here, it doesn't contain any initial value. But once we assign this will emit an event. Okay, so the signature of the pass-through subject will look something like that. All right. So typically you do we'll do this user and error, and let's just initialize this. So when this is a success case and we receive that users model, we're going to do user users subject dot send. Okay, and then we can send the users inside over here. Okay, if a failure case happens, so users subject dot send, we want to select the one that says this one over here, and then let's do dot, and then let's pass in the error. Okay, so right now it's going to complain because we are in a closure. So let's do a weak self. Okay, we can do something like that. Self. Okay, I believe this will work. Alright, let me do a command B again to ensure that this is building correctly. Alright guys, so this is what we need to construct the users view model. Okay, so what I would like to do over here is that let's call fetch users here. Okay, and then maybe let's do it at the bottom over here. So func fetch users. Okay, so what it means is that I can just call view model dot fetch users over here. Okay, and because I am fetching this, I'm calling this fetch user method. Once the result is being returned to us, this pass-through subject will be updated. Okay, so what we want to do is that we want to bind that to the users table view controller. So maybe what I like to do is to call observe view model. Okay, so let's create a function over here. So func private func observe view model. So I'm going to do a view model dot. Okay, so I have the user subject over here, and then I can call sync. Alright, so again, hit the enter button. This will be result completion, and then this will be users. Okay, so what I can do is okay, let's create a users array at the top over here. So user equals to something like that. Alright, so now that we have the users, we can do users.count, and then over here I can say cell.title, .text label .text equals to, let's create the user first, equals to users index path .item user dot, oops, am I getting something over here? No, I'm not. What's the problem? Let's see. Oh, like that. Silly me. Alright, so user dot name, and then cell dot detail label dot text equals to user dot email. Okay guys, so once I have the users, I'm going to assign it self dot users equals to users. Okay, if an error exists, then maybe what I want to do is let me have a look. Alright, so I'm gonna just switch through this, switch result completion case. If an error exists, then maybe I just want to print out the error over here. Okay, and then default, let's just break this. Oops. Okay, and also I have to create some kind of subscriber over here. So private var subscriber. Okay, so I can maybe just create an any cancelable like that over here. So this is the other way to do it. Okay, so I can just assign it like that. Okay, so I believe this is going to work. Okay, so I can also just call self.tableview.reload data over here as well. Okay, and maybe it's best for us to just move this into the dispatch queue.main.async. Let's move this into the main thread so that we don't get any threading issues over here. Alright, so I'm gonna quickly just run this and let's see if this is working for us. Alright guys, so as you can tell, the this table view is loading as well. So if I'm to put a breakpoint over here and let's just run this one more time, I should be able to land over here. So if I do a PO users, you should see that this displays all the users within the JSON payload itself. Alright guys, so let's just talk about what is